The Anzio beachhead was a miserable place to live. The ground was flat, marshy, and waterlogged. Winter rains flooded trenches, forcing soldiers to spend days standing ankle-deep in cold, filthy water. Trench foot spread rapidly. Rats fed on the dead and wounded. The smell of decay hung permanently in the air. Supplies arrived under constant fire. Trucks moved only at night, headlights blacked out, crawling through shell craters and mud. A single artillery hit could wipe out an entire convoy. Medical evacuation was a nightmare. Wounded men often waited hours or days to be moved. Field hospitals were regularly shelled. Surgeons operated in tents and bunkers as explosions shook the ground around them. Men did not fight for ground anymore. They fought to endure. Failed breakouts and bloody counterattacks. In February, the Germans launched a series of powerful counteroffensives aimed at splitting the beachhead and annihilating Allied forces. German infantry advanced behind rolling artillery barrages. Tanks followed close behind, firing directly into Allied positions. In some sectors, German units came within sight of the sea. The fighting was brutal and close. Trenches changed hands multiple times in a single day. Bayonets, grenades, and rifle butts were used when ammunition ran low. Entire companies were wiped out. Yet despite enormous losses, the Allied line held. Naval gunfire from battleships offshore played a crucial role. Massive naval shells slammed into German attack formations, breaking up assaults at critical moments. Allied artillery, though outmatched in range, fired continuously. The Germans failed to destroy the beachhead, but they succeeded in pinning it in place. By the end of February, Anzio had become a stalemate of mud, blood, and steel. Command crisis and blame. As casualties mounted, tension exploded within the Allied command. Winston Churchill was furious. From London, he demanded to know why the beachhead had not been exploited when it was first secured. British newspapers, under censorship, hinted at disaster without revealing details. General John P. Lucas became the focal point of blame. Lucas believed his caution had saved the beachhead from annihilation. His critics believed his hesitation had doomed the operation. The truth lay somewhere in between. But politics demanded a scapegoat. In late February, Lucas was relieved of command. His replacement was General Lucien Truscott, an aggressive and experienced officer known for demanding leadership and relentless pressure. Truscott inherited a nightmare. Truscott takes over. When Truscott arrived at Anzio, he found exhausted troops, shattered units, and a front line held together by discipline and stubbornness alone. Instead of launching immediate large-scale offensives, Truscott focused on restoring morale and improving coordination. He reorganized defensive lines, strengthened artillery coordination, and intensified aggressive patrolling. Small unit raids began, robbing German positions. Naval gunfire and air support were better integrated. Slowly, the Allies began to regain confidence. But Anzio remained deadly. German artillery never stopped. Casualties continued to mount daily. The beachhead consumed men at a horrifying rate. Still, Truscott prepared for the moment when the stalemate would finally break. The waiting game. March and April passed in grinding misery. Rain turned the battlefield into a swamp. Soldiers rotated through the front lines, spending days under fire before being pulled back for brief rest, if such a thing could be called rest. Both sides waited. The Allies waited for a breakthrough at Monte Cassino. the Germans waited for the Allies to make a mistake. Every day, men died for inches of ground that would be lost again the next night. Anzio became a symbol of endurance without progress. By May 1944, the Italian campaign had reached a breaking point. For months, Allied forces had bled against the Gustav Line at Monte Cassino, while the men at Anzio endured siege conditions with no relief in sight. But now, everything was about to change. The Allies launched Operation Diadem, a massive coordinated offensive designed to shatter German defences across Italy. British, American, French, Polish, and Commonwealth forces attacked simultaneously along the Gustav Line, applying pressure the Germans could no longer absorb. At Cassino, after repeated failed assaults, the German defences finally began to crack, and when they did, the effect rippled all the way to Anzio. The signal to break out. On May 23, 1944, after nearly 4 months trapped inside the beachhead, Allied forces at Anzio finally received the order they had been waiting for: break out. Under General Lucien Truscott, American and British units surged forward. Artillery thundered. Tanks roared across ground that had consumed men for months. Infantry advanced behind rolling barrages that flattened German positions. For the first time since January, the Allies were no longer merely surviving. They were advancing. The breakout was brutal. German resistance was fierce, but it lacked the depth and coordination of earlier months. Supplies were running low. Units were exhausted. The pressure from Cassino was too great. The German ring around Anzio began to collapse. The road to Rome opens. The original plan was clear. Truscott's forces were meant to push eastward, cut Highway 6, and trap the retreating German 10th Army. If successful, it would destroy a major portion of German forces in Italy and potentially end the campaign months early. For a brief moment, that victory was within reach. German units were stretched thin. Intelligence reports indicated confusion and gaps in their withdrawal routes. Allied armour was closing fast. Then came a decision that would haunt the Italian campaign. Mark Clark's choice. General Mark Clark, commander of the US Fifth Army, made a fateful call. Instead of focusing on encircling the German army, Clark redirected forces toward Rome. The reasons were complex, political, symbolic, and personal. Rome was the first Axis capital within reach. Capturing it would be a historic moment, a powerful message to the world. But the cost was immediate. German forces used the opportunity to escape. Columns withdrew northward under cover of delaying actions, preserving much of their strength. The chance to destroy the German 10th Army slipped away. For the men on the ground, this decision was invisible at first. They were too busy fighting, advancing, and dying. But historians would later call it one of the most controversial decisions of the war in Italy. Entering Rome. On June 4, 1944, Allied troops entered Rome. Civilians poured into the streets, cheering, waving flags, embracing soldiers who looked more like ghosts than liberators. Tanks rolled past ancient ruins. Church bells rang across the city. Rome had fallen. It was the first Axis capital liberated by the Allies. But the moment was bittersweet. 2 days later, the Normandy landings would eclipse Rome in headlines and history. And behind the celebration lay the grim reality of what Anzio had cost. The true cost of Anzio. The Battle of Anzio left scars that could never fully heal. More than 43,000 Allied casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. German losses were similarly devastating. Entire units had been erased. Veterans carried physical wounds, psychological trauma, and memories that followed them for the rest of their lives. Many would later say that Anzio was not a battle of maneuver or brilliance, but a test of endurance beyond human limits. It was a place where survival itself became an act of courage. Aftermath and judgment. In the years after the war, Anzio became a case study. Military academies dissected the landing, the hesitation, the siege, and the breakout. Churchill would later reflect bitterly on the outcome. Mark Clark defended his decision to take Rome. Others condemned it. There was no simple verdict. Anzio succeeded strategically. It helped break the Gustav Line and hasten the fall of Rome. But it failed tactically to achieve its full potential. It was a victory paid for in blood, hesitation, and missed opportunity. The men who endured. For the soldiers who fought there, debates over strategy mattered little. They remembered the shelling that never stopped, the mud that swallowed boots and bodies, the sound of Anzio Annie echoing across the beach, the cries of the wounded in flooded trenches. They remembered comrades buried in shallow graves near the sea. Many never spoke of Anzio again. Others spoke of it only in fragments, smells, sounds, flashes of terror in the night. To them, Anzio was not a lesson. It was a wound. Anzio today. Today, the beaches of Anzio are quiet. Waves roll gently onto sand once soaked in blood. Cemeteries line the coast, rows of white crosses facing the sea. Names, ranks, ages, many barely more than boys. Visitors walk where tanks once burned and artillery once roared. The silence feels heavy, as if the land itself remembers. Anzio stands not as a monument to victory, but to endurance. Final reflection. The Battle of Anzio was meant to be bold, swift, and decisive. Instead, it became one of the most brutal and prolonged struggles of the Italian campaign. It was a battle where courage met chaos, where opportunity was lost to caution, and where victory came at a terrible price. Anzio reminds us that war is not only decided by plans and generals, but by the men who endure its consequences. And long after the guns fall silent, it is they who carry the cost.